What's up, sports ballers? After 7 grueling months of pretending to have other hobbies, we can all collectively watch football 3 days a week. Week 1 had some sloppy games being played, but I think we overall learned a lot from Week 1, and I'm here to recap that for all of you who couldn't watch all 16 games. Let's start with the Thursday night football game, the first game of the NFL season. Chiefs fans and Kelsey fantasy owners all were crapping their pants with the news last week that Kelsey suffered a knee injury. I remember personally the first report that I saw said that he didn't suffer ACL damage, but the fact they were even looking for ACL damage scared the crap out of me. It turns out he just hyperextended his knee, but he still wouldn't play in week 1. But with Kelsey out with his injury and Chris Jones still holding out for a contract, the Chiefs didn't really have many good players playing besides Patrick Mahomes. But with Mahomes under center, you always have a good chance to win. Unfortunately for the Chiefs though, Kadarius Toney happened to be a double agent for the Lions. Not only did he drop a wide open pass that became a pick six, but he also dropped a wide open pass that would have given the Chiefs a great chance to take the lead inside 2 minutes. To give credit to players actually on the Lions roster, Amon-Ra St. Brown continued his dominance from last season and is a top 10 wide receiver in the NFL. Jahmyr Gibbs looked electric in his first game every time he touched the ball, but it does look like this will be a split backfield with David Montgomery. And Jared Goff was pretty good. Jared Goff is now 2-0 against Mahomes, and dating back to last season, he hasn't thrown a pick in 359 pass attempts. That's not very goofy indeed. In a rainy, miserable game in a miserable city of Cleveland, the Bengals put up a measly 3 points. Now credit where credit is due. The Browns played their butts off. Myles Garrett and Zadarius Smith were pressuring Joe Burrow like they were single women, and Grant Delpit, Greg Newsome, and Denzel Ward were glued to the Bengals' top receivers. Joe Burrow, the highest paid player ever, was on his A game, throwing for less than 100 yards and no touchdowns. Deshaun Watson was okay, but like I said, the numbers in this game were overall deflated because of the crappy weather. For the Browns, Nick Chubb is still the best running back in the league and put up an efficient 100 yards like it was nothing. The Browns are 1-0 and they showed that they can compete in this tough division. A team in the AFC North that didn't compete this week though was the Pittsburgh Steelers. Although a game can never truly be over in the first quarter, I think everyone knew where this game was going. Brock Purdy looked great in his return from his UCL injury though, throwing 2 great touchdown passes to Brandon Ayuk. And I don't want to overreact, but I think that Brock Purdy may have found himself a new favorite target. Also behind this offensive line for his first full season, CMC was amazing, rushing for over 150 yards. Really the only positive here for the Steelers was TJ Watt. He's like that Bugatti in the crappy house meme. He had 3 sacks, including a strip sack that he recovered himself. He was consistently getting to Purdy, but nobody else was. Najee Harris could barely run the ball as they were down by 20 in the blink of an eye, and Kenny Pickett, despite throwing the ball almost 50 times, couldn't do much either. This could be the season they finally fall under 500. And we might as well round out the AFC North with the Ravens vs. Texans game. While it was looking sketchy for a little bit, the Ravens took care of business against the Houston Texans team full of players who can barely legally drink. It was a sloppy win, which you can afford against a bad team in week 1, but there is unfortunate news for the Baltimore Ravens. J.K. Dobbins continued his cruel cycle of injuries. He scored a nice touchdown in the first quarter, but by halftime he was in the locker room with a torn Achilles, ending his season. You thought he'd be healthy, but JK, I guess. Some good news for both teams though. Rookie Zay Flowers looked like a wide receiver 1 for the Ravens, which is something Lamar hasn't had in quite a few years. And for the Texans, CJ Stroud couldn't get in the end zone, but threw for almost 250 yards with no picks. He will be allowed to have his growing pains, and this wasn't the worst start to a career. P.S. Congrats on having your first NFL completion going to yourself. Love that selfishness, CJ Stroud. And P.S.S. Congrats to these teams on a scoregami in week 1. Now let's go to what might be the most mid-game of this entire season. This game featured 1 total touchdown and ended 16-15. Now if that doesn't get you riled up for NFL football, I know a lot of other things that might, to be honest. This game showed us mostly what we expected. Derek Carr is a fine quarterback, and that this is most likely Tannehill's last season, even if the only options behind him are Malik Willis and Mayo Boy. Derrick Henry is still that dude, but teams will continue to pack the box. Honestly, I don't really feel like talking much about this game, but shout out to Rashid Shaheed and the Saints on starting the season 1-0. Baker, touchdown maker! This was a super weird game for last year's flukiest team. First off, Kirk Cousins had like 250 yards at halftime, but the score was tied 10-10 because of three first half turnovers by the White Mamba. The receiving attack looked good. Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, and Jordan Addison all had good games, but Kirk's decision making cost them this game. If they can't be unreasonably lucky in close games this year, they don't have a chance in the NFC North. And starting for a different team for a third straight year, Baker did enough to get the win. My favorite part about this game was seeing Mike Evans catch a touchdown and then just run to the sideline without a celebration and talking to nobody else on the sidelines. That was freaking hilarious. But yeah, Tampa Bay Buccaneers get a 20-17 upset win over the Minnesota Vikings. The long-awaited debut of Bijan Robinson was at last upon us. Fantasy football managers who took him in the first round were anxiously waiting to see him play, and he definitely impressed. He averaged 5.6 yards per carry behind this good O-line, and had 6 catches for 27 yards, including a highlight play touchdown. From a fantasy perspective, there's slight concerns with Algier out touching him, but Kyle Pitts had 2 catches and Drake London had none. They're going to have to run the ball down your throat 30 plus times a game, so he's going to be more than okay. Bryce Young for the Panthers didn't have the greatest debut, but we've seen quarterbacks with way worse debuts succeed in the NFL. Mr. Dinklage himself had 2 interceptions, but did get his first touchdown pass out of the way, which Hayden Hurst immediately sent into the upper deck. Whoops. Unfortunately, no one in the passing game super excites me for the Panthers this year, so I think it's going to be a long year for Bryce Young. And the last game in the 1 p.m. window was Jaguars versus Colts. The Jaguars debuted their new offense starring Calvin Ridley, and he looked more locked in than he is at a slot machine. He had over 100 yards and the first touchdown of the game, and almost had a second touchdown later too. After an Anthony Richardson rushing touchdown, Trevor Lawrence threw a dot to Zay Jones in the back of the end zone, who made a ridiculous catch, making it 14-7 going into halftime. The Jaguars are going to be really hard to stop if they're firing on all cylinders, but this game was close. In fact, the Colts were leading entering the fourth quarter thanks to a scoop and score touchdown by DeForest Buckner, where he literally just slapped the ball away from Tanks Bigsby on what he thought was a dead ball. But the Jaguars would score 2 touchdowns in the fourth and hold the Colts on a goal line stand in the final minute to win 31-21. P.S. Thanks for covering the spread. Anthony Richardson showed his insane potential, a cannon arm, crazy speed, evasiveness in the pocket, but he also showed his recklessness with some bad passes and not sliding on a play late in the fourth quarter. Writing some notes down for these games, I legitimately almost forgot about the Commanders versus Cardinals. This is the last game of the 1 o'clock window I haven't talked about yet, and it was just a sloppy, ugly game that scared the crap out of me. Like many other people, I chose the Commanders for my survivor pool because they were going against the frickin' Cardinals. Their starting QB is Josh Dobbs, a career backup who started learning this playbook like 15 days ago. And he wasn't good by any means, but he kept them in the game. His numbers look decent on paper, no one really looks at stats on paper anymore, so I guess they looked good on screen. But he took too many sacks and he missed some really open receivers. On a positive note, the Washington defense looked good as they allowed no offensive touchdowns to this tanking Cardinals team. I'm really curious to see if Kyler Murray is going to play this season for a Cardinals team that looks to be not a very good team. Broncos country, let's die. The Denver Broncos started off the Sean Payton era with an onside kick, which to be fair was extremely close to working. And the Broncos were extremely close to winning. Yet, in Broncos fashion, actually in the same exact score as Week 1 last year, they lost 17-16. The Broncos are still yet to beat the Raiders since their move to Las Vegas, and now have a 7-game losing streak to the franchise as well. Those of us with a brain had a feeling this Broncos team wasn't going to be much better than last year. They really haven't improved while the rest of the AFC has. And they had a chance to build up some momentum against the Jimmy G-led Raiders team, and they still crapped themselves. Jimmy G was pretty good, and for some reason Demario Davis could not contain Jacoby Myers, who had like 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. This is definitely a bad omen for the Broncos season. Let's finally talk about a fantastic football game. This game featured over 950 yards of offense and 70 total points in regulation, as these two teams traded touchdowns like punches in a heavyweight fight. My bet of this being the highest scoring game of the week at plus 550 odds was easy money. Tua fumbled the ball within the 10-yard line of the first possession and threw a pick on a 3rd and long in the third quarter. But besides that, he was unbelievable. 466 yards and 3 touchdowns. With 215 yards and 2 touchdowns, being to his favorite woman respecter, Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill's hands and route running just seem to get better every year, and he still hasn't lost a step of his crazy speed. But the Chargers were no slouch in this game either, but they made a few crucial mistakes. Most importantly, Herbert was stopped on 3rd and 10 at Miami's 32-yard line with 20 seconds left in the first half. It seemed like they didn't know if he was out of bounds or not, and for some reason they called their timeout with 14 seconds left. They could have just let the clock run to 2 seconds and kick a field goal as time expired. Instead, the Dolphins were left with 9 seconds after the field goal, and a 22-yard catch by Jalen Waddle, and a 30-yard pass interference thanks to J.C. Jackson got the Dolphins a field goal before the half ended. But it was the Chargers who had a chance to land the last blow in this fight, with a minute and 45 seconds left, only needing a field goal to win. But the Miami defense finally showed up, forcing an intentional grounding penalty and getting 2 sacks on a 4-and-out drive to seal the game. These teams both have to shore up their defenses, but they should both be in the thick of the playoff race this year. Super Bowl 52 rematch with Tom Brady in the crowd for this game, but this time I guess there was no quarterback as good as Nick Foles. No, in all seriousness, I thought this game was going to be over in the first quarter, like that 49ers-Steelers game. The Eagles were up 16-0 by way of a first drive field goal, a pick six, a first play fumble on the next drive by the Patriots, and then another touchdown. After that, the teams punted 6 straight times. These are some good defenses, but I didn't expect the Patriots to really be able to break through on the scoreboard to make this game close. But Mac Jones led 2 touchdown drives at the end of the first half to really make this a game, and it stayed close the rest of the way. The New England defense would bend but not break, allowing 3 more field goals, and Mac Jones would score his 3rd touchdown of the game with less than 4 minutes left. But the 2-point conversion that would have brought the score to 25-22 failed. The Patriots would get one more chance after a defensive stop, and even drive to the red zone, but since they needed a touchdown, they had to go for it on 4th down, and they turned it over on downs, sealing the game. The Patriots are always difficult, but if the Eagles want to be back-to-back NFC champions, they're going to have to defeat much tougher teams than the New England Patriots. Oh geez, don't tell me the Packers drafted a 3rd straight Hall of Fame quarterback. I mean, that might be an exaggeration. He wasn't perfect, but he did have 3 touchdowns in a dominant Week 1 win. And in Packers fashion, he did it by absolutely dismantling the Bears. I'm so sorry, Bears fans. It was close in the first half, but in the second half, the score was 24-6 and 38-14 at points, so it really wasn't close. What I was most impressed by was the Packers' O-line. They let Aaron Jones have a pretty good night on the ground, having over 50 yards with good efficiency, and they only let Jordan Love get sacked a single time. In what seems to be a weaker NFC North, the Packers could be in the playoff race if Love continues to play this well. And it looks like the Bears are going to be disappointing once again. Their major additions in Khalil Herbert and DJ Moore both didn't show much, especially DJ Moore. He got locked up by Jair Alexander. I'm mad that this was the only game in my 8-leg parlay that didn't hit. I didn't expect this game to be competitive. Nonetheless, the Rams to dominate the Seahawks team that was in the playoffs last year. Despite Cooper Kupp going on IR, the duo of Tutu Atwell and Puka Nacua was all Matthew Stafford needed. They both had 119 receiving yards in this game. Geno Smith didn't make any huge mistakes, but he just couldn't get going. Their 3-headed monster of DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and JSN had just 8 catches for 70 yards combined. DK Metcalf did have a nice shove on a poor Rams cornerback, though. The Rams D-line was able to pressure Geno all night, while the Seahawks barely touched Stafford, and that to me was the big difference. An interesting development for fantasy football players, Cam Akers had 22 carries and a touchdown, but he only rushed for 29 yards. They were giving Kyren Williams the ball much more in the second half, and he looked better than Cam Akers. If you have an open roster spot in fantasy, pick up either Kyren Williams or Puka Nacua. And finally, for the Sunday night football game, if there are any children watching, please shield your eyes. This game might be too vulgar for your innocent minds. The Cowboys defense absolutely toyed with the Giants. They had an all-time performance. They made Danny Dimes look like he was just worth a dime rather than $160 million. Daniel Jones finally got over 100 yards in the fourth quarter after being sacked 7 times, hit 12 times, and picked off twice. The Cowboys returned one of those picks for a touchdown and even had a blocked field goal touchdown for good measure. The Cowboys defense looks to be one of the best in the league, and this Giant offense just doesn't seem to have made a big improvement. The only positive for the Giants is that Darren Waller is healthy. That's literally the only thing I can think of. If the Giants looked like this, and the Commanders could barely beat the Cardinals, the NFC is really going to turn into a two-team race. And finally, the game of the week, maybe even the game of the season, Monday Night Football, Bills versus Jets. And as a Jets fan, this game had the worst start imaginable. On the fourth play of the game, Aaron Rodgers was trying to evade pressure, and he landed on his left leg awkwardly, tearing his Achilles. That's right, the 39-year-old Hall of Fame quarterback the Jets traded immense draft capital for started his Jets career 0 for 1 passing before suffering a season-ending injury. That's just so Jets. I really hope this injury doesn't end his career, but the possibility of that is definitely non-negligible. And after all this offseason drama, Zach Wilson was back as QB1. In terms of the game, the Bills would get on the board first with a field goal, and on their next drive, Josh Allen would throw a very forced interception to Jordan Whitehead. The next play from the Jets' own 5-yard line, Breece Hall would rip off an 83-yard run, and he looked great coming back from a torn ACL. However, with Zach Wilson at the helm, the Jets could only capitalize on this drive with a field goal. The Bills would tack on a touchdown and a field goal to make it 13-3 at halftime. With Aaron Rodgers out and Zach Wilson in, optimism was definitely low in the Meadowlands. But the NFL scriptwriters went crazy. In the second half, Josh Allen would have not one, not two, but 3 turnovers, including 2 more interceptions by Jordan Whitehead. Yeah, that's 3 interceptions for him, already reaching his 2023 bonus in week 1. The Jets were finding success running the ball and drawing up some safe plays for Zach Wilson. And also, let's show some appreciation for Garrett Wilson, who had an absolutely ridiculous touchdown catch after a pretty awful throw by Zach Wilson. After Josh Allen's 4th turnover of the game, the Jets capitalized with a short field and kicked a field goal to take a 16-13 lead inside of 2 minutes. But in Bills fashion, they were able to quickly march down the field and attempt a 50-yard field goal. Tyler Bass put it up, hit it off the upright, and somehow got the lucky bounce in. Overtime. Josh Allen is looking for his first overtime win on his 5th try, and he got the ball first, so he can't groan and moan about the coin flip. They got nothing going and had to punt it off to the Jets. Zach Wilson would have to lead a scoring drive in overtime, unless rookie Xavier Gipson takes the punt 65 yards to the house, winning the game. What a game for the Jets, and the Bills lose in Bills fashion. Obviously, this is a really good feel-good story for the Jets, but the Aaron Rodgers news tearing his Achilles really sours this win for the New York Jets. Zach Wilson is going to have to impress a lot of people in order for the Jets to still have playoff chances, and obviously the Bills are still in the playoff hunt, but they're really going to have to shore up some things. They should not have lost to an Aaron Rodgers-less Jets team. And that's it for the Week 1 recap. Let me know if you enjoyed this style of video, and I hope that you do because I want to do another video of this for Week 2. Bye-bye.